Hi world, welcome to my channel. My name is Christina. Thank you so much for being here. Today we're going to be doing another book review. This time it's on Red Ryder. So let's hop right into it. Today I'm going to be reviewing Red Ryder by Kate Ellison. Yeah, Kate Avery Ellison. This was a book that I actually saw on a book Facebook group, and somebody had recommended it to me in kind of the mystical fantasy element. And so it was on Kindle Unlimited, so I got it, and I read it in an entire day. Yeah. That doesn't mean it was great necessarily, but I'm going to start in the beginning. No spoilers, and then towards the end, if there's any spoilers I want to share with you, I'll let you know, so you don't have to listen in if you don't want to. So this book is placed in a post-apocalyptic world. It is very interesting. The government has been taken over by these werewolf beings that just take women from different villages that are humans that are compatible for breeding, and they breed the women with the werewolves to create more werewolf offspring. And there's a big gap between humans and werewolves. There's a lot of hate. There's an underlying like revolution about to happen, and all these like hidden kind of like gangs that are forming to try and go against these werewolves. So the werewolves are actually called the Sworn. Very interesting. They look like humans, but they can like morph into these really cool werewolf guys. So the main character, her name is Meredith. Her family calls her Meredith for the most part. Her boyfriend calls her Eerie, and then just about everybody else calls her Red. So I thought it was really cool. It was kind of like that mixture of Little Red Riding Hood and the wolves, but it's like more modern, more post-apocalyptic, and it's cool. I like when you have a very traditional, simple name and the author condenses it down into something really unique. So I thought Red was a really cool name. She had an experience when she was 10 years old where her family died on her birthday, and all she was left with was her grandma, and then she had this lover named Cassian that she was just obsessed with. So the story unfolds into Red pretty much just living her entire life with her grandma, who was the only one who survived, and this like magical cloak that she has. One thing that I really didn't like was that the author was very repetitive in the way that she described things. For example, she would repeat a lot of words, or her sentence structure wouldn't make sense. And that was really irritating for me because I felt like I had to go back and reread a lot of what was going on because I had no idea what was going on, or just the way that she wrote didn't make sense to a reader. And I would even go and read it out loud to try to make sense of it, and I couldn't make sense of it. And I was like, what the heck? After looking at reviews on Amazon, that's a pretty normal thing for this author apparently. Also a lot of spelling errors. I didn't see too many, but I also was just kind of like zooming through it. But in the next few books, it looks like there's a ton of spelling errors. But she also created a lot of emphasis around certain things. For example, the cloak that Meredith wears, she talks about how it's so magical and how Meredith can feel electricity underneath it and blah, blah, blah. And how there's a scene in the beginning where like, when you flip it to the red side, Meredith is hidden from the Sworn and the Sworn can't see her. So anyways, like during the book, these things unfold where she's like in like a Sworn prison and like all this stuff goes on, and she like never uses the red side of the cloak. Like she doesn't try to hide from the Sworn, but she's so scared and all this stuff, and it didn't really make sense to me. And I was just like, why do you create emphasis on these magical things and then the character never uses them? It just didn't really make sense to me. It was kind of irritating in a lot of ways. Also, the author has a really weird way of describing how the characters are. So there's this big Sworn. He's like the predecessor to be the Alpha Sworn. His name is Vixer. I always think of Vixen. It's a weird name. It's like Victor, but it's Vixer. His name's Vixer, and he's like the Silver Wolf, and Red calls him Silver. And in the book, he's described so many times with these like dark, stormy, deep, like almost black eyes. but he like wears this like wolf helmet. Like when he takes it off, his eyes were like moon blue, and I loved that description, by the way. It was like moon blue, and they're supposed to be like piercing and blue, and he has these dark features and like kind of long hair, and he's very handsome and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, so maybe he only has like black eyes when he has the helmet on, right? And then I like kept reading through it, and most of the times it didn't seem like he had the helmet on, and she kept like describing these deep dark eyes, and I'm like, why? Like what? Like I'm so confused. So does he have black eyes or does he have blue eyes? Like I can't tell. So that was really frustrating on my end. I think the storyline is really solid with a lot of potential. There are these like zombie tree characters. They're called tree crawlers, and it's like the crawlers like can pierce you through the heart, and they're like a big enemy of not only like the revolution pretty much, which is called the Crimson Blood, and the Sworn. It's just kind of like that middle character that everyone has that common enemy, and it's the tree crawlers. And they'll take over any living thing, and like it'll like just grow trees out of corpses and stuff. And it's really interesting, actually. The concept I think is really cool. I couldn't help but think that this plot and like the storyline resembled a lot of The Selection. I think her name was Kira Cass is the author of that. That's a similar kind of post-apocalyptic book where like the government's taken over, and like these princesses all have to, well, they're all fighting to be this princess and whatever, and the next queen and whatever, and they go to this castle. It was, if you read that book, I'm not going to go too into that book. If you want to know more about that book, I can share more about that book. But they're very similar plots in the sense that it's like small town girl, doesn't want to be anything, just kind of living through life, lost her family, lost something, goes on, meets this prince, hates him, doesn't want to be with him, whatever, he's an enemy, but she's forced to go to his castle, and they are enemies, and they're just working together for certain reasons, and then they fall in love, and they end up together. And it's like, okay, but like, I don't want that. I don't want to read that. I feel like I've read that already. That's how I felt in Red Rider. It was just like, it was a reoccurring kind of, okay, I know what's going to happen. I feel like the magical element could have been incorporated more to differentiate it. I was also reading a lot of reviews on the upcoming books, like the next books, and because I was interested to know if it's worth it. And pretty much this really solid, strong character. She becomes weak and very complacent, and I was like, okay, I don't want a complacent character. I don't want to focus on this love story. Like, I don't want to be bored. And apparently the next few books are very boring, even though the original plot in the first book actually a lot of people felt like it had a lot of potential. For that reason, I know I shouldn't have read the reviews, but for that reason, I'm not going to waste my time. Also, the book was really quick. I read it in about 3 or 4 hours. It's supposed to be only like 200 or 300 pages. I feel like for 3 or 4 hours, it was still a quality, solid book, but I did have to reread a lot that was going on. It was very frustrating for me. I liked the main character. I liked Vixer, the Sworn. There is a bit of a twist that comes towards the end that I really was not into. So if you're watching, I'm going to give you my full rating of what I think, and then I'm going to do some spoilers. So for this book, Red Rider, I would give it a 6.5. I think that the writing has potential. I think it wasn't really that long. I did enjoy the plot and the storyline, and I think that it was a good start. But I think the execution of it was mediocre at best. I think grammar says a lot about a writing style and how much you really care about your book. So for that reason, I wouldn't really recommend this to anyone to read unless they just wanted to kind of get through a book in a day and have something a little bit familiar, if that makes sense. But as like your new favorite series, just like Penryn and the End of Days, that's a great story, great series. But this is just it's kind of like something that you'd read anywhere, you know? So now into the spoilers. So if you don't want to see the spoilers, stop watching. Meredith is a chosen. She has this tattoo on her, and that means that she is bred. She's like breedable for the werewolves or whatever, and so she's Like, she has a boyfriend back home, yada, yada, yada. He turns on her, whatever. Okay? Who cares? He wasn't anything anyways. His name was Neil. Oh, no offense if your name's Neil, but his name was Neil. I just think of the freaking Christmas movie. The guy, Neil, in the Santa Claus movies, that's who I think of when I hear the name Neil. So that's just like my natural interpretation of anyone in a book that's named Neil. I'm like, meh, Neil. So anyways, so Neil turns on her, whatever. She saves his life. She's in this situation because she saved his life. She gave up her biggest secret. She's been hiding it for years. It's on her wrist. It's these circles. And Vixer is really like kind to her. Well, when she was a kid, she had this one love that she can't get rid of, and he was apparently killed when her father and her mother were killed, and his name was Cassian. And she talks so much about Cassian, and it gets to a point where before she leaves to go to the capital city, her grandma tells her, oh, hey, by the way, it didn't seem like it was worth me telling you, but your dad died, but your mom and Cassian were taken to the castle, or taken to the capital. And she's like, oh my gosh, why didn't you freaking tell me? So now she has this whole new purpose of going with Vixer, being a chosen, going and with him and finding her mom and her lover that she grew up with. They were like 10, but she's convinced she's gonna find her lover. And so they go on this long adventure, and he's really cold, Vixer is, but he's like weirdly familiar, and he kind of like tests her in some ways. And they end up getting like overrun by these tree crawlers, and like a lot of people die, and he almost dies, and she saves him, and they start to fall in love, whatever. And then he's like, it gets to a point towards the end where they like start making out in this like house. And they're like realizing they're falling for each other. And he calls her Eerie, which is the name that he called her when they were little. And she's like, oh my God, Cassian, is that you? And he's like, yeah, it's me. And she's like, why didn't you tell me you're not the same man? You kill people, you're working for the enemy, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, well, they threw me in prison, and then I got adopted, and I worked my way up into the ranks, and now I'm Alpha Sworn. And I'm like, so that's it? Some little poor boy just like gets turned into a werewolf and just works his way up the totem pole of the Sworn, like the most elite people this little kid does. Like, I don't know, it was literally like a paragraph maybe this long. There's no in-depth examples to anything that happened to you. It's just like quick, like, oh yeah, I worked my way up. Now here I am. Isn't this life great? And she's like, well, you're not the person that I used to know, blah, 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 all dramatic. And then they get rescued, and he like runs off, and now she's like torn between falling in love with him, but he's not the man that she remembered, and she can't tell if he's Vixer or if he's actually Cassian. And I'm just like, okay, hold on. I just like such a little book after that I was like, this is just kind of dumb. Like, and the only difference that this is between the Selection and the Red Rider is that Red Rider, okay, the main character, Meredith, she has Cassian, who she thinks is still alive, and they're two people, but they're actually one. So now she's falling in love with Vixer / Cassian. Whereas in the Selection, America, the main character, they're two separate people, and her hometown love like works in the castle, and she still loves him, but she's falling in love with the prince. Two different people. That's the only difference. But then everybody knows she's gonna leave her hometown love for the prince because that's her duty, and she ends up falling in love with the prince more anyways. So it's like, whatever. It's just like boring. So boring. I'm like, you can't give me any better twists. So I started reading in on some spoilers on the continuing books. Don't mind me, by the way, if I just keep blabbering on. Kept reading more books, or more spoilers on the continuing books, and I'm like, okay, so what happens? Pretty much, she finds her mom in the second book. It's really boring. Her mom's pretty much like, yeah, you're never getting out of this terrible place. And she's like, give it up, like live your life as a chosen. Which in Meredith's mind, a chosen is supposed to be like a woman who's literally used as like just a breeding dog. Like just meant to breed for the wolves, not meant to find love, whatever. In the last book, apparently, it's finally like told that Vixer is part of the Crimson Blood, the revolution, but he's undercover and all this stuff. And I'm just like, this is so dumb. Like, the first book, I liked it. You know, like, I'd maybe read it again. Maybe. Like, if I had nothing else to read. It was good enough that, like, it kept my attention, but I'm not, like, pining for more. I really won't read the second and third book because it's just, like, it's so predictable and so cliche, and I need some kind of element of uniqueness. And apparently also, the series is very similar to The Handmaid's Tale, and it takes off a lot of that, and there's a lot of debate on whether there's a lot of originality in the series. So, that being said, I would probably recommend you skip this one. If you want to read something unique, go for it. If you love this book, tell me why. If you don't love this book, tell me why. I want to know. But just based on my own experiences, like I said, I think I would give it a 6.5, and I would say don't read it. But yeah, if you have any books that you want me to read, let me know. I would love to consider it. I'm about to start reading the next series, so I'll have a video up soon. But thank you so much for watching and just being here with me and hanging out. I don't have my puppies with me here today. It's really hot in our house. Our air conditioning's out, so they're downstairs where it's actually cooler. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. Let me know if there's anything that I can do a review on for you, and I should be posting a lot more soon. So awesome. Love you guys.